When I say transgender, I just mean people identify as a woman or a man, which I consider to be a biological distinct category, and they aren't one of those things. I believe and I think I can demonstrate pretty easily that trans identity is a mere social construction attempting to adapt to an ever elusive role called gender, and they're trying to map it onto a biological phenomenon of which they are a part. What is a man and what is a woman is an ontological question as much as it is a biological one. From my worldview, the using of the law of identity, a man can only be what he is, and he can't be what he is not. A man follows one of two typified pathways during reproduction, which is male or female. In this case, he's male. I don't believe for a second there's any actual disagreement as to what a man or a woman is. So why the immorality? Well, that's simple. It's a pervasive lie that gender even exists outside of our minds as a category. A tomboy, for instance, can have all of the gender traits you might associate with a male, whatever those are, whichever ones you decide that you make up, but be very clearly a female and not in any way, shape, or form anything other than what she is, a female. Their nature doesn't change. By asking or requesting society embrace this obvious lie, it's from my worldview of Christian ethics, totally immoral, combining obvious untruth with a pervasion of it being objective reality, which it clearly is not objective reality. If two men have sex, for instance, are they homosexuals? Yes. If a man and a woman have sex and the woman identifies as a man, are they still homosexuals? It's a good question. I don't know. Nobody seems to know the answer to that. What if in the middle of them having sex, one of them identifies as the other sex and just really means it? Are they now engaged in homosexual sex, even if they're members of the opposite sex? Are gay men straight because they have sex with men who dress like women, or one who's undergone some sort of genital mutilation? Should people be advocating for a system which allows others to become reproductive dead ends and glorifying what in society is a live and let live policy, where we now see trends of LGBTQ and trans ideology skyrocketing due to it being a social contagion, which pollutes the idea of a nuclear family, and it pollutes the idea of having a good reproductive society? The answer is no. We shouldn't promote social contagions, nor should we promote lies, nor should we promote behaviors which lead to higher outcomes of obvious degeneracy in society. We should instead promote a heteronormative society whose values run along the lines which lead to the normalization of reproductive trends and the normalization of family through the interest of society continuing for new generations to enjoy the fruits of our labors. And with that, I'll end the opening statement. There's a lot there for the opponent to respond to, and then we can dive right in.
All right, yeah, that was a lot to get out all at once. A lot of different things to talk about there. So, Jessica, floor is all yours to respond to that in your opener.
Oh yeah, it's there is a lot of I wouldn't say nuance to the biological characteristics of a man and a woman. They do not change. Even someone like myself who has undergone surgeries, like I'm still a biological man. So I think we both agree on that issue. And I don't defend transgenderism. To me is a lot of people like to call it a mask or a costume that we're wearing, or and it's not, in my eyes, it's not a mask. It's not a costume. Yes, I don't look the way I was born, and I think that's okay. Does my lifestyle promote a healthy, growing society? Absolutely not. It does not. I don't think that is a immoral stance to have, but I don't see why there can't be enough people on Earth to there's going to be heteronormative relationships and gay relationships. So if I'm in a relationship with another man, yes, that's a gay relationship in my opinion, but there's nothing wrong with that. The problem that we're running into is we're literally running out of people because this transgender trans movement, the gay movement, it's kind of taking over, and it is a social contagion, and it is a trend that is detrimental to a healthy, growing society. I get that part of it, but there's still going to be a lot of outliers, like myself, that just do not conform to normal standards, and I don't think that's immoral, in my opinion. So who's the one that decides? Is it one man, one person who wrote a book that says everyone has to live by this code of ethics or morals, and that's it? And if you don't, what do we do with those people who choose not to? You know, is it a crime? Are you just shunned from society? Are you kept in your own bubble? What is the answer? I think coexist is the only way to be, and that, you know, as a society, we have to come together and decide what is the limit, what's the line, what's the level of moral standards that we will all accept as who's gay and who's straight, and how many reproductive couples or nuclear families do we need to continue to populate the earth and grow society. That's the problem. Like, it is a legit problem. I don't claim to have the answer to that moral issue of if everybody is gay or trans and sleeping with the same biological sex, our society ceases to exist. So I don't know. What is the answer?
Andrew?
So are we in open dialogue now?
No, you could do a 5-minute soliloquy or something, and
however you want.
Yeah.
No, I'm fine with just having open
Okay.
dialogue.
Yeah.
Are you good with that,
Yeah.
Jessica?
Yeah, of
Okay.
course.
Go for
All
it.
right, great. So just kind of starting with the last thing that you said, which is that if everybody on planet Earth were LGBTQ, that would clearly mean the end of the human species, right? Would you consider that immoral?
See, I mean, how would it be immoral? Because if society has that standard that everybody is in that community, then it's not immoral by that society's standards.
Even if, so if, let's say for a second that there was a pill that you could give everybody that cured them of being LGBTQ, whether it was the T or the L or the B or whatever it was. And 90% of society, or 95%, was LGBTQ, so they weren't reproducing. But this pill was available that would just cure that. Would you give them the pill?
I would make it an option, because this life that I live is not for everyone. And I think studies have shown that there is a lot of trans regret. There's days I wake up and I look in the mirror and I say, wow, did I really do this? You know, was this the right decision?
Well, right. Hang on. Let me dive in a little more.
Okay.
Let's assume for a second that it cured them. All other things stayed equal, other than they no longer engaged in this behavior. And that you knew that would secure the continuation of humanity. But by not making them all take this, it assures that humanity ends. Would you make them all take the pill?
No, I wouldn't.
You wouldn't?
I would. Yeah, society would have. I would never force anybody to do that, but I think.
Then what's your problem with this? Then what's your problem with a social contagion?
Because not everybody is, and it's.
Yeah, but who cares if they are? Even if everybody was engaged in this social contagion and it led to the complete destruction of humanity, you just said you didn't care. So the thing is like, if you agree with me and say this is a social contagion is bad, what makes it bad? It's just a contagion that people socially adopt. And even if it leads to these kind of horrendous and horrible outcomes, who gives a shit, right? Even if it led to the entire extinction of humanity, you wouldn't care.
Yeah, well, I'm not one to take away someone's right to choose to be who they want to be, but I do see your point, your dilemma. Yeah, it would, like I said, destroy society. There would be no civilization left. So yeah,
but the question is about the reason I asked this question first. It's to figure out whether or not you valued consequences or if you valued biblical ethics or something like that. And it sounds like you value consequences. What I don't understand is why you would be against a social contagion then. If a social contagion is just social behavior which leads to things which we consider non-optimal for society, who cares if people can just do whatever the hell they want? You've already conceded that the very worst outcome which is possible you wouldn't care about. So why care about a social contagion? I don't get it.
Well, I'm just trying to keep people from making bad decisions for themselves due to a social contagion. Like,
yeah, but you see what I mean? This is a problem. Why would you care about bad decisions that a person makes due to a social contagion if the worst possible outcome, which is the utter ruination of humanity, is not a thing you would stop if the social contagion was adopted by everybody? I don't get it.
Yeah, I mean, you got me. That's a gotcha. You got me. I don't have maybe the will to take away people's, right to decide, to choose, like to take that pill that you talk about, like to fix them, as you put it. I don't think that's right to do to society. I mean, isn't there a way to say, look, you address society as a whole and say, look, if every one of you chooses this lifestyle, we will die. That's all there is to it. And I think that there are enough differences in human interaction, but not everybody would choose that.
Yeah, but the problem here is that even if there wasn't, you still don't care. Because even if there wasn't, and they all chose that lifestyle, which led to a non-reproductive society, which would assure the destruction of the human race, you still wouldn't care. So I don't understand the position. Like, oh, there's enough outliers to prevent that from happening. Great. But if there wasn't, you still wouldn't care. Right?
Yeah.
so then all of that's moot. None of that even matters. It's all totally irrelevant. Essentially, the ability for people to be able to identify with behavior which is destructive to humanity is more important to you than humanity.
Yeah, I would say, yeah, but I think
so wouldn't that be a fundamentally selfish lifestyle, Jessica? It's like fundamentally at its core, isn't that? Could you think of anything I could ever say that's more selfish than if my own behavior led to the end of humanity? I don't care. Can I ever say anything more selfish and self-centered than that? Can you think of anything I could even say that would be more selfish than that?
No, that would pretty much be it.
That would be it.
Yeah, but again, you can't. No, I lost where I was going with that. But there's so many differences in humans. Like that's never going to happen. Now, I do agree with the educators and the people who, like Elon said, we are running out of people. We are running out of smart people. We're running out of working people. We're running out.
Do you know why that's happening?
I would say not 100% this lifestyle, but it's not hurting or it's not helping the matter. For sure.
Well, it's actually simple. It's because of materialism. So if you don't have an offset for materialism, like religion or something like this, it gives meaning to people, and they can have non-procreative sex without any form of retribution at all or consequence. Meaning either the state's preventing this from happening or the consequence of pregnancy and reproduction prevents promiscuity, then what ends up happening is an entailment, if there's no buffer from religion, is that people will engage in the reproductive act without doing the reproductive part. It's pure hedonism and selfishness across the board. You can map what's happened with the fall of the birth rate from the introduction of the pill, but all the way back to the 1800s, it was steadily going down, but now it's going to continue to decline, and we're going to run out of people everywhere because of one thing, hedonism and sheer selfishness, which is the thing which ultimately, when we start at the end of your logic train, is what you promote, hedonism and selfishness. Ultimately, if all of humanity must die so that they can engage in whatever hedonistic perversion they want, you're fine with that.
Yeah, that's a tough one. Like, Who gets to decide that answer for all of humanity? Who decides?
Well, the
That's
state. You can have cores of groups of people who form nations who can decide. We form nations and we decide on laws, and we decide on these laws. Like, we might have a law, for instance, that says, look, you can't wear women's clothing in public. It's bad for society. We're not going to promote things outside of heteronormative society. We're not going to promote things which don't lead to these great reproductive outcomes for society. Instead, we're going to promote only things which do. So we can decide. That's the great thing. We used to be able to decide to do these things. We used to be able to. There used to be a market of ideas where people like me could come in and say, look, when I ask these hedonists if they don't give a shit, if humanity ends so that they can live their materialist lifestyle to the fullest. And this would include, by the way, if you believe that, then you believe that it's okay to indoctrinate other people to believe that. There's no reason for people not to give into moral nihilism. And ultimately, this leads to the destruction of all of humanity in your own kind of predilections, your own sorts of passions destroy you. For what? Just pure hedonism. And that's a ghoulish, nightmarish dystopia that we're facing down that you're contributing to.
I don't disagree with you. Like I it sounds biblical what you're talking about. Like, I never was, I've read the Bible, but yeah, it does sound like, they said, you guys are heathens and you keep acting like this, you'll cease to exist. And they just didn't care, and the people didn't care. And
you don't care. Right? You don't care. It's like, isn't the entailment of everything you ultimately believe by the time we get to the end of the road is that everything in the Bible that they warned was basically right? That if we allow society to give in to their hedonism, their predilections towards degeneracy, it will literally lead to the end of humanity because people don't fucking care.
No, they don't.
Including you.
But not everybody thinks that way. And you are bringing a hypothetical to like you said, 95%, say 95% of everybody thought this way, then yeah, society would cease to exist. But there will never be a 95% population that all confides in one ideology.
How do you know?
Impossible. That's impossible.
Why is that impossible?
Because there are people who follow religion, who believe in the Quran, believe in the Bible. Like, they have their set beliefs.
In 1960, 95% of the United States believed in Christianity.
Okay.
So 95% of people easily within a society can believe in a single ideology, which can include hedonism, which can include secularism, which can include rejection of any type of material restraint. We know that this is true because we have the trends in our own nation that this is true. Yeah. And the further we move away from the trends, yes, you could have easily 95% of the population who end up believing that just pushing in to your own form of degeneracy is optimal because it's good for you, even if it's completely destructive for the rest of humanity. Even if it runs all of this indoctrination, the trans indoctrination, LGBTQ indoctrination, the social contagion, which you agree exists, it only exists not just through the normalization of the left, not through the normalization of what leftists have done, but by the perpetuation of those who claim that they're on the right. Also doing the exact same thing, creating the same kinds of normalization biases in society so that people are more and more accepting towards this kind of hedonism. How are you not a part of that?
Well, I am a part of it. Like, I don't talk about this a lot in my background, but I was part of a nuclear family before I transitioned. I contributed to society. I have children. They are adults. They can procreate. They are not part of the LGBT community. And my lifestyle did not indoctrinate them to my path of life. So I can honestly say I did procreate and I did contribute to society in that manner. But will everybody in my shoes? No.
Almost
And
nobody in your shoes does. And that's the
there's no-
truth. And if you look
yeah.
at the promotion of this lifestyle, even by you appearing on places like Jubilee, things like this, creates the same types of normalcy which you're trying to fight so desperately against or claim to be fighting against. There's really no distinction between you and the leftists. It's the exact same ideology ultimately in the end. Why do you give a shit what bathroom they use? What do you give a shit what they demand people call them or don't call them? Ultimately, as long as the social contagion is adopted by enough people and enough people are happy with it, you don't care. So what's the fight even for?
Well, I think you're talking, the way I see it, you're talking about two different fights. I'm talking about keeping biological sex separate for males and females to live safely, in my opinion. That's my fight. And the gender pronoun things, that's complete nonsense. But you're saying I don't care about society progressing, and I don't like to think that I'm that way, but the point you make is valid. Like, yes, it's very selfish of me to say something like that. I'm not going to deny
You're
it.
just doing the same thing that they're doing. There's no distinction. There's actually no reason for you to associate with the right. It's a complete and total progressive lifestyle that you're advocating for, ultimately based around hedonistic self-centeredness. It has nothing to do with duty. It has nothing to do with ethical grounding. It has nothing to do with any of that. It's just kind of this blasé blah libertarian lifestyle of do as thou wilt, as long as you're not impeding or hurting somebody else. But ultimately, that type of lifestyle is one of the most destructive to society at large because it creates no normalcy inside of it. And even you, when you see the result of your own community destroying that normalcy, go, wait a second, you've taken it too far. But have they? If ultimately too far for you is all of humanity goes extinct due to your ideology and you don't care, how far can these people go?
There is no stopping them.
There is no stopping them. And there's really, you should just change sides because there's no distinction in the advocacy, really. All you're doing is just kind of asserting a preference over and over again. I prefer that you don't do that. I prefer you don't. But rather than belaboring this point, let me move on to a different one.
Well,
if you don't mind.
Let me ask you both.
Go ahead.
For my live chat real quick. So somebody brought up a really good point here, and I want both of you to address it. So threatened society in my live chat, and again, I'm watching both live chats, but I'm trying to take questions from mine predominantly, but I'll definitely from yours as well. Somebody had pointed out, but Jessica has already procreated. She already has children. So how does your argument apply to her specifically if she's already functioned in society what you think should be normative?
Because the promotion, what my argument hinges along the lines of what is being promoted inside of society. Whether or not Jessica, let's say Jessica had 200 kids, right? Tall order, but for a man, not impossible, right? Males can indeed impregnate 200 people pretty easily. But
not me anymore.
just through normalization of this type of ideology, right? You can indoctrinate hundreds upon hundreds more. And this happens inside of the public arena constantly, whether they claim to be conservatives or liberals or progressives or whatever. It's all a move towards ideological degeneracy, which is designed for a non-procreative future. Whether you yourself procreate or not, it's beside the point, and it's only a small minority of the LGBTQ who even do. And it always is that way. It's always been the case. And so that's how I'd respond to that. And I don't even think that Jessica would argue the point.
Well, I would. The only thing I would say is that back to what you said about me being conservative and I should just give up. Well, I get accused of being a gatekeeper all the time because I am trying to literally gatekeep the trans community. As far as LGB, like those people, I can't gatekeep them. I'm not part of that lifestyle. I am a heterosexual, well, I am a gay, transsexual, biological man. So we call it HSTS, homosexual, transsexual. That's me. but I did, like I said, I created life, and that life I created, being female, has the chance to procreate again. So it's not, I know you're not blaming me specifically on the whole world, but
I am.
In my defense,
I am blaming you, and I'm blaming your ideology that you promote
that's fair.
for the results of this hedonistic madness, which we find ourselves in, a non-procreative future with not enough human beings so that we can all practice our hedonism and do as thou wilt. The West is dying in the meantime, and people are literally unaliving themselves at rates that are skyrocketing, and depressions through the roof. Nobody can afford housing, all of these different problems which exist, right? And it's not all of that is you, but a lot of that is based around the hedonistic degeneracy, which is promoted by those who follow your lifestyle. And that is an unfortunate truth that I wish more people would just accept as being truth.
I do accept what you're saying is true, and you can call me selfish and say that I don't care about society living on, but to the point that I am not the person that most other trans people or new people just looking to be trans. People message me all the time, hey, can you help me out with this? No, I don't promote this lifestyle. Anybody who asks me personally, I will tell you, this is not for everyone. And that's why I'm labeled a gatekeeper, because people, you don't want to hear what I have to say. This is a hard life. This life isn't easy. It sucks. A lot of the times it sucks. You think I like being called dude and bro every day at work? It's not fun, but I don't fight with it. I don't fight about it. I live my life, and I'm not out there promoting this lifestyle as like, hey, look at me. Like, my social media is pretty lame other than protecting
How can it
sport.
be anything other than a promotion of the lifestyle? I mean, like, for instance, the implants and the, you know, all of that stuff. And I'm not trying to make this personal, really. I'm just trying to make and demonstrate a point. Okay.
Yeah, totally fine.
All of these different things are definitely you trying to promote this thing as being something you want people to look at, right? The modifications, body modifications, things like that, or else why would you do them? What would be the point, right? You want people to see them. You want people to look at them. You want people to look at everything about you, about how you're, you know, presenting to society and things like this, because you do want them to see that. You do want them to see you. You do want them to engage with you on that level. Yes, you are indeed promoting this, whether you like it or not. You're promoting. It'd be like me saying, well, I'm not promoting Nazism, and then walk around town with a swastika on my arm. Would you believe me?
I have a super chat that I addressed to both.
Yeah,
of you.
that's fair. But like I said, yeah, I am against transitioning kids. Like, I don't believe in that 100%. I will argue with anybody to the tooth on that.
Yeah, but like, why? Why would you
let me get the super chat.
I mean, I'm honestly, I just okay.
Yeah, so
ahead,
because it's addressed to both of you. And by the way, I have the world's worst lighting right now because I was so used to streaming about this time months ago, and I haven't streamed for quite a while. It's really bad right now. I do apologize. The super chat says from Michael King for 10 pounds. Why thoughts are it's okay as long as it's a minority. If it reaches a certain threshold of the population, then it's a problem. And I think that's a fair question for both of you. Not to philosophize too much, but this really does go into what I think John Locke would be talking about as far as the weighing of moral freedoms, personal freedoms, as far as natural law. And so, do you think that because it's such a minority right now, it has significant impact on society, or only if it increases to the point where it becomes a problem society, where Andrew's arguments come into play? And I'll let Jessica address that first.
Well, I think according to Andrew, it is becoming a dominant society of, you know, immorality. And I mean, it's not, I don't think that society would ever grow to that length. Like, personally, it's just, there's too much difference in the world. And there are too many people who do believe in a way of life that is not part of this LGBT community. So life will go on, and I don't know. Like I said, I hate being a gatekeeper, but where is the line? Who decides that you can or cannot live this lifestyle just because of society won't survive? Like,
Well, so
sorry.
I can answer this.
Go ahead.
It's two parts. First and foremost, Jessica, are you aware that 1 in 5 Gen Zers identify as LGBTQ?
Yes, I am.
Is there any doubt in your mind that that's not part of a social contagion?
It is 100% a social contagion. 100%.
So if that's the case and the trends continue to increase, how long before it's 50%? How long before it's 70%? You can say, well, that's the slippery slope, but it's not, because in this case, we have raw data which shows the indoctrination levels rising every single year. There is no slippery slope. And the truth of, hang on, let me finish.
Of course.
If you don't mind.
Of course.
This is not a slippery slope. It's a social contagion, and you know it's a social contagion. The distinction is that you just don't care. That's the distinction, is that ultimately you don't care. And you don't care because if it's a social contagion and X amount of people contract it, but it makes them happy, you don't give a shit. Right?
Okay, so I don't think people should be limited. We've already discussed that. But what the recognizing that Gen Z is astronomically climbing towards this identification of the LGB, I think it is a social contagion, and I 100% believe that it is going to be a fad that literally dies out. Like, I am just waiting I don't think it is a slippery slope. I think it's going to die out. Like, people are going to realize, they're going to wake up and go, oh, that's stupid. Like, what? Like, that's no way that I don't believe that society will keep going down that hill. I really don't. I have faith.
Forgive me if I'm not going to base what I think is going to happen on society off of what you hopefully believe is going to be the case. But the truth is that all the evidence points to the contrary. We've seen the acceptance rate of this type of behavior climb year over year over year since essentially the late 80s and even in the 70s. And the reason for this is because LGBTQ groups went in and, well, they became a huge, massive lobbying force to be reckoned with. When the White House is promoting this, and everybody in Hollywood promotes this, and everybody everywhere promotes this kind of agenda, how can you not think that little kids' cartoons, 2-3 years old, who are seeing this, that's not part of an indoctrination process? Of course. I'm like, what else could it be? What else is it?
I am hopeful that people like myself and adults who do not believe in this, like yourself, that will be enough to stand up against this social contagion and tell people, look, if you're going to live this lifestyle, you're going to go through years of therapy to make sure this is what you want and that you are actually this way and it's not a social contagion. So do we want to invest the money in society and help people with their mental issues and help them live a different lifestyle other than what the social media is telling them to live? I don't know. Like, I think that's a worthy investment instead of investing in, gender affirming care. That for minors, that's BS. That is the wrong path to go. I think the path to be on would be hire more doctors, train people to talk to people like myself who are young and coming up and trying to get into the trans community or non-binary people, and see what the root of the problem is and make sure that we can tell them that it's just a social contagion. You're going to grow out of it. I believe society will grow out of this. I think it's a fad. I don't see it.
So you're just part of a fad? Are you just a part of a fad?
I'm 49 years old. I've been at this for a while, so I don't.
So you don't think, of course, you're part of a fad. Just everybody else is part of a fad, right?
No, there are plenty of real transsexuals out there. We are based, and there are a lot of us. But
so how do you know which ones are part of the fad and which ones are the real ones?
That's the problem, right? Like, I've talked with Destiny, I've talked with Blair White about these problems. Like, if there was a 100% way to get into a child's brain and find out yes or no they are, like, I would be all for it, but there isn't. There is no way to know.
Then there's no way for you to make the determination that this is just a fad. There's no way to make the determination that you're not even part of the fad, except how you yourself, explain that you're not. But there's no way for us to determine that if you aren't part of the fad, why should we assume that this is just a fad everybody else is a part of? That seems like it's just kind of your feelings, how I feel about it. But even more importantly than that, I want you to think about the implication of what you're saying. The implication of what you're saying is that you hope that there's enough normal people, let's just say that for the sake of this, okay, there's enough normal people out there that they're going to offset the amount of abnormal people so that those abnormal people can continue to live in decadence on the backs of the normal people. That's actually what you're saying here.
Well, this goes to a statement in the live chat that I think is appropriate for this particular question he's asking. Danielle Mercado says, Jessica suffers from gender dysphoria, Andrew. She does not promote everything. She has a medical condition. Do you think it's possible to differentiate between two types of situations where you have somebody who actually does experience these types of gender dysphorias as opposed to somebody who is more falling along the lines of a social contagion? I think there's probably...
Well, here, let me just bury this argument right this second.
Certainly.
Jessica, if you suffered from some type of mental illness where you thought that you were a queen, the Queen of France, should I call you Your Majesty if it made you feel better?
No.
No. Do you think that we should promote in society that if people thought that they were the Queen of France, that people should call them Your Majesty? Do you think that that would be good for society to do?
Well, I guess in essence, you're kind of asking the wrong person, because I am not a pronoun person. I don't care how people address me. I don't care how people perceive me. I live my life for me. This is how I feel comfortable walking around in public. This is how I feel comfortable going to work every day.
Yeah, but that's the hypocrisy that's being alluded to here, which is like, you're saying, listen, I'm not saying that you have to affirm my identity. I'm not saying that you have to say that I'm this or I'm that. I'm not saying any of that. I'm saying that that's a choice for you. Okay. I'm saying that's a choice that you make. But on the other hand, I have absolutely no real argument as to why it is that if this social contagion ran completely out of control and made people happy and they did do those things, I don't actually care. So the point is like, why even fight against any of it if it's showing that these people are happier by engaging in this type of thing, even if it leads to these kinds of perceived bad outcomes because they're not part of your preferences? Why do you even care? Because ultimately, if all of humanity dies out as a consequence of it, as long as they're happy, you don't care, right? So I don't even understand what you care about here. What is the value you care about here?
Well, I wanted to bring up a point too. Like you said, with no certainty will my hopes of the fad dying out happen. But I can also say in no certainty, you did provide numbers, and you have, statistics that say our society is on a downward slope, right? Like, so.
And you agreed.
Yeah.
And you agreed with me, Elon Musk, that we have a reproduction issue and that now's not the time for hedonism, right?
Yeah, we do.
And yet here you are, kind of the mass promoter of the hedonistic lifestyle from every single angle. I mean, to the point of even absurdity that if all of humanity were to go extinct, but just be comfortable doing it, you don't really give a shit. So if these people, Jessica, they go, well, we're really happy like this. We're really happy being decadent. We're really happy with society like this. We don't care. Give us our antidepressants. Give us our drugs. Let us sit in the street like this because it makes us super happy. It's like zombies, right? That's what's happening all over in these cities. You can watch all these videos of people just hung over, literally like this, on these different drugs. If it makes them happy, why do you even give a shit?
Yeah, let me ask you, Andrew. How do you?
Let Jessica finish if you don't mind. Absolutely. I'd like the answer to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
Like, why do you even care?
The gatekeeping thing, like, yeah, I get it. I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
There's no reason for you to even care. There's nothing.
You're painting me as, and I know it's not personal. I totally agree.
None of this. I assure you, I take none of this personal. But we're in a debate of ideas.
I totally appreciate that.
I want to remind people of that. Please don't take anything personally. I know we got diametrically opposite live chats. I'm watching his, I'm watching mine, and there's
nothing. I never have anything personal against who I'm debating. I'm here to represent my worldview, and Jessica's here to represent Jessica's worldview. And
you're amazing. It's fine. No, you're not offending me at all. So, maybe lose track of where I was. I'm just not an experienced debater like Andrew, so I apologize for that. But I don't think that I'm 100% advertising. Like I said, I know it's not personal against me, but I'm not the one promoting this lifestyle. Even though you say me walking around, just me existing is promotion of this lifestyle. I don't believe that to be true. I also don't believe that anybody who wants into this lifestyle because of the social trend is 100% going to stick with it. I really don't believe that.
Let me show you how. Let me show you how you engage in the promotion of this, whether you think you do or not. Do you agree with me that women don't need to wear makeup?
Not all of them.
Well, they don't need to at all.
No, nobody needs to wear anything.
Why do you wear makeup?
Because I feel better this way.
Because when people, is it because of the perception of how people see you, just like it is with women? Do you think that female women, do you think that they wear makeup because they just like it, or do you think that they wear makeup because they think that other people will perceive them better or perceive them differently if they wear it?
Well, everybody knows the stereotype is, women wear makeup for other women so that they are not compared. Like that's pretty normal. I wear this every day. So I am comfortable with presenting myself in public like this.
Right. But the reason you're wearing makeup specifically is because you want people to perceive a certain thing. For instance, if you're not wearing makeup, just like other women, you're going to be perceived differently, right?
What if my desire is to be perceived as a happy person, an enjoyable individual to be around?
Well, that wouldn't require any type of cosmetic surgery to do, would it?
For me, yes. Up here, it does, because I cannot stand the way
because you can't stand how people perceive you, right?
I don't care how people perceive me.
What if you never did any cosmetic surgery whatsoever of any kind, no makeup at all, but there was a piece of technology that you could attach to yourself, and everybody who saw you would see the thing that you wanted to be seen as?
Yeah.
Would you even need to do any of the cosmetic anything for you to be all right there?
Yes, I would 100%. The avatar thing would not suffice me. No way. And I know that I don't know what movie it is, but yes, there are stories about where people just have their avatar. That's what's presented. They don't look like that, but that's how they want to look. I look like this because this is how you want to look, right? No, I need to be this way, or I don't want to be around anymore.
Well, let's ask both of you. Where does personal freedoms and choice come into play as opposed to obligations and duties we have to society? Obviously, like Andrew smokes. I used to smoke. I smoked for 25 years. I quit about 8 years ago. Cold turkey. It's a choice. We all know that smoking is bad for you. It causes higher insurance rates. It's secondhand smoke is dangerous to other people. We all know the stats, but it's a personal choice and it's personal freedom. People that wear makeup, even men way back, for centuries have always kind of tended to wear some kind of makeup in the arts and to have better aesthetics and when they did portrayals of women in plays. So this outward appearance that we have is a manifestation of how we want others to perceive us, to make us feel, of course, good about ourselves. So where does that line meet up against what Andrew, I think, would argue would be a social duty that we have as far as whatever obligations we have for procreation or anything else? Where do those match up?
First of all, I don't believe in this John Locke notion, Enlightenment principle notion of rights Rights don't exist. They're constructs of the mind. They don't exist anywhere in material reality. You can't point to one. You can't touch one. You can't smell one. You can't see one. They don't exist. They're categories of the mind only. All that exists in objective reality is force. And he who has force makes law. And that's what is true. Now, this is not to say that might makes right, but it is to say that might makes. But there's no such thing as a right. They don't exist. They've never existed. They're totally fictitious and made up. They're axiomatic principles and starting points which we have arbitrarily come up with just because it makes in some semblance, maybe some sense, I don't know. But every single right that I've ever seen in my life can be taken away like that because you don't have the right to do shit except what the guy with the gun tells you have the right to do, and that's the truth. There's no right. You don't even have a right to get born.
So are you saying, excuse me, so there's no rights, but privileges? Do you give people privileges? And that's how you see it? Like, it's not a right,
No,
it's a privilege.
A right, so that you understand how I see a right as a privilege absent duty. That's all it is. An entitlement, well, that's a better way to frame it. An entitlement absent duty is a right. So you have a right to vote. You have no duty to vote. You have a right to own a gun. You have no duty to own a gun. You have a right to your free speech. You have no duty to engage in speech, right? Simple entitlements absent duty of any kind. And you're asking me something like, what about your freedom to smoke? I don't have a freedom to smoke. That's totally fictitious and made up. I smoke because I'm able to do so, because I'm able to go buy a pack of smokes and a guy hands me the pack. But the second enough force is applied that says I can't smoke anymore, I can't smoke. And there ain't a right to do shit. That's the truth.
Do you differentiate between rights and liberties? Because the Bill of Rights are actually liberties. They're not technically rights. They're
the Bill of Rights are a piece of paper.
But do you differentiate between right and liberty at all?
No, there's no distinction. Liberty itself, these sort of starting point axiomatic principles which you guys adhere to are nonsense. They don't exist. They're completely fictitiously made up and put on a piece of paper with an arbitrary starting point. And all of these liberties throughout the entirety of your life, Steve, because I can tell you're a bit seasoned, have been taken away from you, have been taken away from you time and time and time again. And there isn't a fucking thing you can do about it. You have the right to do what you're told. That's what you have the right to do by the guy who has the amount of force to make sure that you do it. And that's it. And that's all it's ever going to be, because that's descriptive reality. And everything else is just made up bullshit starting axioms that you hope to God the other guy allows you to engage in.
Andrew, I got to tell you, I've done thousands of videos and many debates, and I got to tell you, that was the most politest way for somebody ever to say, "Look, old Steve." I accept that. That was great. Season.
Shut up, old man. I'm ranting here.
I love it. Yeah, you are. It sounds very communistic, like.
I did agree with most of it, but whatever. I have my own look, man. Nobody agrees with me on everything, and I have my own view. So, but anyways, Jessica, I mean, what do you feel about that, though? As far as he's arguing that he smokes because he's able to do so. Once somebody says, "Look, you can no longer smoke in this area," how if a state said, "Hey, look, we're going to ban smoking," which theoretically can happen. They've already
it already happened in California.
Yeah. You can't smoke within 20 feet of a door. You cannot smoke in certain buildings. But Jessica, how do you respond to that as far as you being able to right now become, trans that hasn't been blocked by any kind of law or state mandate that you don't have the ability to do so? And we're not talking about surgeries. We're just talking about your presentation as you are in right now.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, there's so many different nuances or levels to being trans. Like, are they just going to present with clothing and makeup? Are they going to be kept from actually getting surgeries, facial surgery, breast augmentations, lower surgery? Like, where do we draw the line, and who's allowed to do such things by the man with enough force to stop them? So what I'm advocating for is that as a society, we decided that people under the age of 21 or 18 are not an adult and capable of making educated decisions about the future of their life. So yes, they do yell at me for pushing laws to prevent gender affirming care to minors, and I will stay on that till my deathbed. Like, I will never give up that
If
fight.
you have it, if you had enough force that you could apply, would you stop people by force from doing that?
On the minors, yes, 100%.
And what about their rights, Jessica?
Well, we don't give them rights. Or is it a right to drive a car? Or
who makes the determination? You?
Society.
Oh, so now society can make these determinations, whereas before you seem to be very confused about who made the determination as to who can do what. Andrew, are you the decider, you asked? Are you the one who gets to make the determination as to who can do what? But now when it comes to the form of force that you want to use, then suddenly you know that the answer is that you can use societal force. Isn't that interesting? Whereas before you seemed to be so confused as to who was allowed to stop who from doing what.
Well, we were talking about society as a whole, and I was just specifically talking.
We still
about
are.
Minors. No, I'm talking about. I was talking about minors specifically.
Yeah, but society as a whole is going to have to enforce your laws, right?
Against minors, yeah. Society
That's right.
as a whole.
It's going to take force. It's going to take guys with guns saying you can't do that shit. You can't do it because if you do, you're going to jail. And then it's going to take guys with guns to keep you inside that jail. And if you escape the jail, it's going to take guys with guns to drag your ass back to it. It's going to take force for you to enforce whatever your whims are. And before, when you were so confused about who's going to make these laws to determine what a person can or can't do, you didn't know who the hell it could ever be until it came to your agenda. And then suddenly it's society.
Well, I think society is what I've always said since the start of our debate was that I don't think one man should be responsible for deciding everybody's fate.
Why not?
And
what if it was just you?
It was just you. It doesn't work.
Well, let's just say for a second that all of society wanted to have transitioners at young ages, except you. And you had the authority to push the button that stopped it. You push the button and it stops it. Would you push the button even if society didn't want it, Jessica? Would you enforce your will on all of those people and say, you're going to do it anyway?
Okay, so if you put it like that, absolutely not. If society, if I was in charge and society said, we want this as a whole, we collectively voted and every single person said, this is what we want to do, I would say, knock yourselves out. And don't. So
then there's nothing for you to advocate for because there's nothing that's even you consider to be immoral. So I'll put it to you this way. If all of society said that they could have abortion, all of them, if there was all 8 billion people minus one, me, who said it's fine to have abortion, and I was presented with a button and I pushed it against all of their wills that stopped abortion, I would still do it. Because it's immoral regardless of what everybody else on earth thinks. But you, on the other hand, you just have what's called collective morality. If enough of the collective says that it's okay, you don't even give a shit then either. So if the collective says it's all right for us to detrans the kids, well, Jessica's going to go right along with it because even if Jessica had the power to stop it, Jessica wouldn't. Right?
Sorry, I was on mute. I think
truly mob rule, by the way.
A little bit, yeah. But I think a lot of that comes from where was I going with that? Yeah, just society is going to dictate. But
what about murder? What if all 8 million people, let's say sexual assault, 8 billion people minus Jessica, that it's all right to sexually assault women when we feel like it, even the women aren't willing to fight it. Would you push the button then? Would you go, no, you can't do that, you sons of bitches. Would you do it then?
Yes, of course. See,
why? Why would you do it then, but not for the transition for the kid? I don't get it.
But you're throwing a lot of hypotheticals out there.
Yeah, but sure. The hypothetical's designed to test your reasoning. It's not designed to be a trick question. It's just designed to test your logic and your reasoning to make a determination if we get to the end of it, if you're coming to absurd conclusions. And it's an absurd conclusion to say I believe this thing is immoral, but if I had the power to stop it, I wouldn't. And then on the other hand, to say, I also believe this other thing over here is immoral, but if I had the power to stop it, I would.
You would push the button, Andrew.
That's where my morals land.
Anything that I consider to be biblical morality and Christian ethics, if all of humanity combined told me I was the last man on earth and said, what about our will, though? I'm pushing the fucking button. I'm going to push that button so quick and make your head spin. In fact, I won't even think twice about it. That's it. Done. Button pushed.
Highly contingent upon an individual's interpretation of Christianity. But that's
true with Protestantism, but it's not true with Orthodoxy.
You're Orthodox Catholic, which might take a different approach. Michael King for 10 pounds says, minor is scary. Why do so many trans feel the need to talk to kids and not adults? Not really relevant, but I think it is a point, and that there are a lot of trans adults that are talking to children, which I think obviously Jessica would push the button for that to say if they're in somehow grooming them or if they're indoctrinating them into that kind of lifestyle, that would be a moral wrong. Do you guys agree on that?
Yeah.
Why is there so much indoctrination? I have no idea what. I mean,
because I know why.
Well, other than the World Health Organization and all they want is total control of society. Like, they want to control everything we eat. They want a population control. They want to limit the amount of people that reproduce. And so, whoever's behind the curtain at the WHO and the WEF, they're literally trying to keep us from procreating. Like, in my opinion, by controlling the food supplies, controlling who can procreate, and
promoting the LGBTQ agenda and lifestyle.
Yes,
a thing with which you contribute heavily to yourself, right? These are all things which you yourself advocate for ultimately. And that even if everybody adopted everything that these different organizations wanted, as long as it made them happy, you don't even care. So there's not really even any point to you contesting any of them ultimately. You don't give a shit. And the thing is, I'll tell you another thing too. You want to know why this is all happening? It's all happening because of one thing and one thing only. The dynamics of political control have shifted from Christians being able to think they fell for the great lie that they were supposed to give up their power to secularists because it would make secularists happy. And that's always been an insane belief that they've had. And it's permeated throughout these various Protestant communities all over the place. If you want to know what the big problems in society are, the big issues, you say, well, wait, they're trying to go after our food supply. They're trying to go after this. They're trying to go after that. There's a promotion of LGBTQ. The reason the LGBTQ is able to get promoted this way is because if you have a materialistic worldview, meaning you have no reason to reproduce, you have no religion to fall back on, you have no reason to do any of these things, then what happens is homosexual men are able to accumulate over their lifetime a lot of wealth. They have nothing to spend it on. And what happens is they enter into pervasive positions of power, which far, in a way, overrepresent the amount of them which actually exist in the population, which is about 1.5%, maybe. And because they get into these positions of power with tons of resources and wealth, they're able to bribe Congress via lobbying groups, LGBTQ lobbying groups, in order to change laws which are good for them. There is no reason on God's green earth that LGBTQ people should get married. It's insanity. It does nothing to promote anything for the good of the nation. It does nothing to promote all it does is cheapen an already failing institution, which was already cheapened by the state to begin with. And yet, over and over again, we see the permeation happening of people who go, but I'm one of the good gays. I'm one of the good transgenders. I'm on your side. None of you are on our side. I'm sorry to be none of you are on our side. All of you are part of this kind of elaborate armed tentacle, which has done nothing but been a destructive force in society to every human being that I've ever met. I've never met any who are not in some way affected by the tendrils of this madness.
Jessica, by all means, respond. While you do that, I'm going to fix my lighting. I'll be right back.
Okay. Yeah, no, I don't know. I think that's a little harsh, but to say that I don't contribute to society is like, that's bananas to me, because I do. I am fighting every day. I spend my own money. I fly around the nation. I go to rallies. I go to meetings. I'm constantly doing videos to protect women, to make sure that, you know, women, people like me don't end up in women's prison. That's important to me. People like me don't end up using the women's room. So I don't think that
people like you are a problem that need to be stopped by people like you.
Yeah, pretty much.
that's the defense for the ideology, is that
in any society, everybody, whether you're gay, straight, you have bad people. So there are people, and I'm not saying everybody who's trans is bad, but like, if you're simply identifying as a woman to gain access to the women's room or a women's prison, I mean, come on, like, just be real. You're just being a bad person.
Are those considered to be moral wrongs? Sarah in the live chat, friend of mine, she says, how do you define, we're not going to get too much in moral theory. We both all agreed before we started this that we're not going to get deep into terminological usages. But she wants to know, how do you define morality in the context of gender identity, or in your case, you're talking about bathrooms? And what specific aspects of transgenderism do you believe are detrimental to society's morals and values? So what makes that something immoral of somebody, as Jessica's saying, a person who wants to be able to use a woman's restroom in order to have access to whatever proclivities they tend to have? I think everybody here agrees is a moral wrong, but she's asking basically, how do you define that in the context of morality? Without getting
I'm
into
not sure.
But
well, if I can take a gander, I would
ahead.
say that Jessica probably would say harm.
Harm's a benefit.
If something creates harm, then it's probably immoral.
So immunity type approach.
Consequentialist type approach. If the consequences are bad, then probably Jessica would be more against that than if the consequences were good. So if I was like, if I give you this pill and it cures your cancer, and I give you this other pill that gives you cancer, Jessica's going to take the pill that cures the cancer, right? The consequences are better.
Jessica?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, back to the smoking thing, like, I smoke and I know it's not good for me, but I don't want to stop, and I'm not going to.
Well,
my hedonistic ways will not.
Yeah, what's good, right? Like, if smoking for you creates kind of this pervasive life of happiness, it makes you really happy to smoke, but it leads to an untimely demise, who cares?
Yeah. I'll take it.
Yeah, right. So the same thing you will with humanity. If it leads to the untimely demise of them, take that too, right? So I mean, ultimately, it's just based around whatever the hell makes you feel good.
Are you on the same principle of your?
No,
I'm not a consequentialist either. Yeah, I'm not a consequentialist.
Nope, I'm a Christian ethicist. So I focus my worldview and prism through the teachings of Jesus Christ and the Catholic Church and the divine commands of the Lord Almighty. And that's where I draw the grounding for my morality from. That's the prism in which I view the world. I don't view it through what makes me feel good, but rather, what are my duties to humanity, and what are the things that I ought to be doing in order to fulfill those duties under the divine commandments of God and the Lord Jesus Christ. That's how I view ethics. That's how I view the prism from which I look at reality. And when I see, from my perspective, anytime somebody says, if there could be a small amount of being uncomfortable, but that would mean the continuation of humanity forevermore, so that there's more people born into this fine world that can experience the great joys that come and challenges of Christianity, of course I'm going to do that. Of course I would do that in a heartbeat. I would put a prevalent stop to the ultimate forms of hedonism, which would lead to the extermination of mankind.
I mean, that'd be coherent within your worldview.
Yeah.
It'd be consistent. People ask, since Andrew likes hypotheticals, and I agree with you wholeheartedly, hypotheticals are a wonderful way to test argumentation. A lot of people avoid them and dodge them, and I don't know why. It seems weird to me. But he asks, since Andrew likes hypotheticals and thinks maintaining humankind is a moral good, would he think forcing himself on a trans man would be a morally good act if they were the last two humans on Earth? Not, of course, saying he would do that, but I don't think you have to use trans man in that. It's just forcing yourself on anybody if you were the only two people on Earth, or let's say a secluded island where you didn't have any interactions with society, right? First, if you were the only individual, I don't know what morality would really mean because you're not integrating with society or having to conform with any societal norms or anything like that. But would you believe that if you force yourself on somebody on a deserted island, just you two, would that be something that would be immoral?
Yeah. Morality is going to transcend situations. So the thing is that it doesn't matter how many people are present. I have to operate under the confines of divine command and the apostolic teachings in the Orthodox Church, which have come down from church authority. This is part of divine command and part of Christian ethics. And of course not. Of course not. So you're asking what he's asking, he's trying to present this dialectic. Is it more important for the continuation of humanity if you must do things which are totally immoral for humanity to continue? These are difficult questions, and I'm not sure that I know what the answer ultimately to that particular hypothetical would be, which is the greater duty to keep mankind going by any means necessary if you have one person who's completely resistant to doing it, or if you should follow a higher duty. I would say in that particular case that you can do things which are so morally abhorrent that they may take precedent over the other thing. In this case, I would think that sexual assault would be one of those things.
All right. There's a question that I think is great for both of you. Iron Chariter, who's been around a very long time on my channel, he says, are kids more in danger of being essayed by trans people or Christian youth pastors? And that's, again, we talk about all kinds of stuff on the show. So if this is triggering to people, I apologize, but I don't apologize. You know what you get yourself in for on the non sequitur.
This is par for the course.
We tackle the head on stuff. We don't shirk from this kind of stuff. So I think it's a great question for both of you.
In danger of being what? What's the essayed?
Yeah, sexual. I'm just gonna say sexual assault. I don't care about monetization. Most of my videos get demonetized anyway.
I didn't know what
sexual
you said.
assault. I don't like watering it down because of the.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Well, I would say if you looked at the stats, it's likely that the pastor might commit more SA than the trans person, but in the reverse, I would say it's far more likely that the trans person was SA'd than the pastor. And so that's the flip side of that coin. But if you're looking for who does the most amount of this SA, you would be looking at public schools and public institutions. And the truth of the matter is, it doesn't matter if you're a pastor or a teacher. Teachers commit more of this than any other demographic. Sexual predators go where the children are. So where you have the most amount of children, and that's where you're going to have the most amount of predators, regardless of if it's in a church or if it's in a school or if it's in a synagogue or if it's in, any number of these different places. The Boy Scouts was also another place for this, and so is the Girl Scouts. Unsurprisingly, where there's children, there will be those people who will gravitate there in order to take advantage of that situation.
Jessica?
That's 100% accurate. It's the trans community that I'm part of, the conservative trans or the ones on the right, like that's our number one goal, is to protect the children, whether it's protecting them from the doctors who say they're trans, or protecting them from the teachers who are trying to indoctrinate them and tell them they're trans, or who are trying to take advantage of their situation. Like, oh, you're part of our LGBT community now, so let me take advantage of you. And, like Andrew alluded to, there's going to be predators. And unfortunately, this is being used, I think, as, a vehicle to get them there, get them closer to the kids. And it needs to stop. Like, it blows my mind that we're actually allowing,
well,
I hate saying it, but people like me around children. Yeah. Right. Like, but again, there's going to be bad people, whether they're trans or not. Like, there's still just bad people. And I don't think that.
That's a good point. So there would be bad people. So there would be bad people if there were trans or not.
Do you think it's more media that when there are instances of these types of things, whether it be in the school system, in the churches, or by transgender, that the media will focus on where that person's group was more than the actual salaciousness and the horrific things that happen in those groups. I mean, when we look at the media tends to emphasize this, pastor, trans person, teacher, rather than the fact that the child was, assaulted. Do you think they emphasize on that more?
I mean, aren't we kind of dealing with like the shootings with they didn't release that girl's manifest forever, like because she was part of the trans community, like that they were protecting that person because it's part of the LGBT community. That is BS. Like I'm not okay with that, like I don't. So I think the media sways it to protect my community, so to speak. And I don't agree with that either. Like it's wrong.
Okay. Another super chat. I thought we decided on about 90 minutes, so I don't want to keep Andrew and Jessica too long, but it's completely up to you guys. But we are going at the about an hour and 15-minute mark. Stupid Horror Energy, aka Sarah, says, if transgenderism harms society, why don't metrics like crime and mental health worsen with acceptance? Are there studies showing negative societal changes post-acceptance? Thank you for the $10 super chat. So she's asking, do we have metrics that show that crime and mental health worsen if we decide that transgenderism is a moral ought, or I wouldn't say it ought, it cannot be an ought, but moral acceptable, something that's acceptable in society. Do we show that there's any metrics on crime and mental health?
One of the big problems here, it's twofold. One, nobody has ever bothered to check and see whether or not there's an effect in the mental health of individuals who are forced to lie in order to prevent these people from emotional hostage taking and self-termination. Meaning, if you're asking Christians, for instance, who have an ethic of honesty, that's part of their ethic, that they need to lie in order to prevent you from doing bad thing that you'll do if they don't lie to you, then they're holding you emotionally hostage, literally holding you emotionally hostage. The second, and that's not studied at all, because that's not part of the message, is it? We don't give a shit about what everybody else. We only care about this community, not what the effects to the other group is that might have to participate in the group delusion. The other big problem with this, and this is a huge problem that nobody seems to ever want to talk about, we don't know how many people ultimately are going to end up detransitioned. We don't know ultimately, as this thing really catches on, how many people are going to be crying in their video phones in 10 or 15 years saying, oh my fucking God, how in the world did this happen to me? And we're starting just now to see some of that. We're starting just now to see more and more and more of these people detransitioning and going, oh my God, how did I ever fall for this? This was never what I was. This was never me. This was never immutable. We see it over and over and over. And until this is a big problem, we don't know the accumulation of what this data is going to show. But here's a good counter question for that chatter. If stigma is the problem, and if lessening stigma, you say, has better results for this group, then why is it that if this is actually an immutable characteristic, there should be a reflection of the population, just as many of them back in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, when this wasn't even talked about, but there was massive quantities of stigma towards anything like it. Where were all the people who were self-terminating? Even though there was more stigma than anything that's ever been there in my lifetime, where was all the self-termination? How come they didn't do that?
Jessica?
That's really fucking weird, isn't it?
It is. And, but I alluded to that earlier. Like, there's going to be so much regret. And with this social contagion, and I even said earlier, I 100% will not entertain anyone who comes to me and says, oh, I'm just feeling my way and I want to talk to you because you're experienced and I was hoping to get your insight on being trans. No, I don't talk to anybody. I don't promote this. I do not want people, and it's not me gatekeeping. It's me trying to be real and tell people this life isn't for everyone and this life is hard. This life sucks. I do have moments of happiness and clarity on a day-to-day, but there are days that are harder than others. And I would never, ever tell somebody you should definitely transition. Like insane to me.
You're not a trans rights activist per se. You don't take that.
No.
Yeah.
You try to imagine though that you had somebody who was a communist, a Stalinist communist, and they dressed every day in a full-on communist uniform, and they went online to talk about why other forms of communism are bad, except kind of the form of communism that they advocate for. They're still advocating for communism, and they're still normalizing communism. Whether you kind of want to say they're not, right? They are. Of course they're normalizing. How could they not be? They're just normalizing whatever their form of it is. But ultimately, when other people take up that form, if they don't like it, they move over to a different form of communism that they do like. But kind of having this idea that you're not contributing towards the normalization of this behavior, to me, is absurd, because it'd be like me saying that I said every day that the form of Christian ethics is the right form of ethics, but you shouldn't follow it. It's like, well, that makes no sense. Of course, people are going to follow it.
Okay, but you're comparing the way I look and the way I present to someone who's actively being an activist and going out there and saying, okay, this is a bad way to do it, but this is the good way to do it. I'm not doing any of that.
But you are. The second you say as an adult, it's perfectly acceptable for you to make the decision to do all sorts of bodily, what I would consider mutilation to yourself, because you choose to do so. You are now at that point advocating that such a thing in society is perfectly acceptable. And to say anything other than that, from my perspective, is completely disingenuous.
Okay, I totally respect that you feel that way. I don't feel that me being me is promoting this lifestyle, especially since I tell people every day, don't do it. Like, people come to me all the time. Parents come to me and say, what do I do with my 13-year-old daughter? Tell her no. Let her talk to me for 5 hours. I'll tell her this is not the life she wants to lead.
But what if they're like you though? And that's what's helpful to them. They think that that's the thing that makes them feel the best. Wouldn't you tell that person to do it, Jessica?
No, well, that's what I'm getting at. If they are like me and they actually are suffering from genuine gender dysphoria, then they will power through it. They will push through, and they will still end up being trans. But at least they weren't just like freely told, "Yep, that's the way it should be." Like,
who makes
no gatekeeping whatsoever? That's not cool.
Who makes the diagnosis as to whether or not they have gender dysphoria?
Like I said earlier, we need to invest in doctors and spend money on these kids that are claiming this and see what they can do. They're saying now.
Do you trust the diagnosis that was done for you?
I don't know. Like,
you don't know if you trust the diagnosis that was done for you that you have gender dysphoria?
I talked to my therapist for over 2 years, and I still came to the same conclusion. But ultimately, it was my decision, to push forward with this. And I knew. So
you're not sure you have gender dysphoria even?
Oh, I know I do, because I was ready to go away.
Was that the doctor then who made it so that you had gender dysphoria, or is it something that you yourself decided absent a doctor?
I decided with my doctor, but there was, I wasn't hunting around for a doctor that was going to give me the right answer. I just went.
You were in doctor shopping.
Yeah, no. I spent my 2 years.
Some do. We know that some actually do.
Yeah, but the problem with this is to say,
find a doctor right now who will.
If you're claiming that these kids are just got bad doctors and they're doctor shopping and this kind of thing, right? How do you know that they're not just doing the same exact thing and they're just not sitting down with their doctor and coming to the conclusion that they have dysphoria and that they need this so that they can operate better in society? How do you even know that that's true? That these organizations are totally flooded with the pro-LGBTQ propaganda. What is even true here? How do we even know what's true here?
That is a problem, and that's why that's why I was just about to say, like, the numbers keep going up, that over, I think now it's up to 85 to 88% children left to go through puberty naturally grow out of it. Literally just grow out of it. And that's what needs to happen. Like, I'm not advocating for this. Like, yes, if you perceive me as advocating for it just because of the way I look, that's your perception of me. That is not how I see myself. I don't see myself as a trans rights activist. I see myself as more of a feminist than anything. I do have left-leaning values with, I'm pro-choice. But I'm more conservative on my political beliefs. So
people had asked that earlier, whether you tend to conservative or liberal.
Let me just ask you this: just
whether I what? Oh, go ahead.
Just real quick, if you don't mind. Other than some economic principle, what are your actual conservative principles?
There you go. She tends to conservative. So if somebody had asked that in chat.
Oh yeah, I mean, I will always vote red, vote conservative. Other than the pro-choice thing, I mean everything. I want less government. I think that well, actually I want more government when it comes to my community. Like,
you want more government, right? You want more government when it comes to your agenda, right?
To keep this from being overrunning the population.
Yeah, you gotta use that force applicator for things that you want, right?
Right.
Yeah, that's the same as me, right? I want to use that force applicator for the things that I want inside. Yeah. And the thing, so this is the thing, is like, what is the actual core conservative principles you think you have?
I would say I'm less concerned. I'm just more on the right, like as far as Republican. I don't have a lot of Christian or conservative values. I've said that all along, but I just get grouped in with the conservatives because I would vote for Trump or whoever's on the Republican side. That's where I want.
Do you both agree that conservative and Republican are not necessarily synonymous terms?
They're not the same thing.
Okay.
No. Oh yeah, I agree with you. They're not. No.
Yeah, Republican is a party which engages in party politics. Sometimes they can be more right-leaning than Democrats can, but I wouldn't even say that they're more right-leaning than Democrats sometimes.
The Overton window has shattered, in my opinion. But Andrew, how would your argument be utilized as far as people just say they were just cross-dressers? I mean, the term is antiquated, but it used to be called transvestite. This is somebody who wears women's clothes, or somebody who gets tattoos, or somebody who gets piercings. How does your argument apply to somebody who just does that, but still is heterosexual in nature?
Well, I would just move it towards what we used to have, which is basic decency laws. Right? So it just works like this. No, decency laws. So if you're talking about, we had decency laws all throughout the history of the United States. No pornography, none of this.
Yeah, no, we still do in some regards.
Yeah, I would look at decency laws and I just say, fine. If you're in your home and you want to dress in women's clothing and do the Silence of the Lambs thing, you know what I mean? That's your business. Right? I'm not advocating that government come and kick your fucking door down, a waste of resources, time, energy, and effort. We used to call those people fucking weirdos, right? He'd go home and he'd get in women's clothing and do weirdo shit. Fine. You can go do weirdo shit. But there's absolutely no reason to walk down the street dressed that way. There's no reason any more than I would say that it's okay to walk down the street completely naked, because the reason decency laws exist specifically is to kind of keep the undercurrent in the fabric of society together. That's why we're not allowed to walk around naked. That's why we're not allowed to walk around topless. That's why we're not allowed to walk into supermarkets with our shoes off.
You can in California, apparently in San Francisco. But decency laws also said that women couldn't wear pants at one time. There's still fundamentalists believe that.
So
is that something that should be in a decency law?
Well, I mean, so what you're doing at this point, if you're going to nitpick each kind of individual thing, you can just say, okay, well, you can take decency laws and you can apply them locally. You can have localized ordinances like they do right now for things like, well, smoking, for instance. Maybe in a bar in Tennessee, I can smoke, and maybe in a bar in Michigan, I can't smoke. That's a localized law. Right,
so
which is based around this.
Regional.
Yeah, well, you can do something that's regional or localized. You can even do it at the city level. You could say that a population of 2,200 people in this town, you're not allowed to do X. That happens all the fucking time, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I do think that nationally, you should have some form of decency laws too. And maybe you don't need to make them nearly as draconian, so that inside of kind of these smaller districts, they can make the decisions at the local level for how to apply kind of the nuance of those types of questions, which is, can you wear pants? Do you have to wear a sundress? Do you have to wear this? Do you have to wear that? Those are localization questions. The national level, you could just say, look, essentially you're not allowed to do things. You're not allowed to upset the moral fabric by dressing in women's clothing. And you can have localization for what that would entail.
Jessica?
Yeah, I agree, but like it kind of would fall back to like we need laws that protect the kids from transitioning. And with my community and the whole bathroom debate, like who gets to use the bathroom, who doesn't, that's a touchy one for us, because we need, I would say, a national law that says, okay, so if a transsexual person like myself has been on hormones or had surgery, they are pretty much unable to essay a female. A biological man like myself who's had surgery or been on drugs for more than 2 years is incapable of essay on a female. So that person technically could use the women's restroom.
You mean penetrative essay?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they could still use fingers.
I get. Yeah, they could still. They could still do.
They could
still essay. Okay.
They could overpower the woman, and yeah, it could happen. So, where do we draw that line? Who decides that this transsexual gets to use the women's room, this transsexual doesn't? Who makes that decision? I don't have that answer. I am okay with a blanket ban. I mean, there are so many passable transsexual women out there that you wouldn't even know. I could walk 2 women right in front of you and you wouldn't be able to tell the difference. They should not be in the men's room because they probably would get an essay from an actual man because they look and appear just to be exactly female. Now, most women say they can tell the difference. But like I said, so that's all nuanced. But who makes the rules? Who decides that the cross-dresser with AGP, that man should never be allowed near women or children at all? But yet he is. And the new law, the laws are, nobody's made a definitive law that says, okay, this is what has to be. You have to be on surgery or after surgery and on drugs nobody.
Well, they have made laws. They've made laws saying that you have to go to the restroom, which reflects the biological sex you were born with. And instantly,
I'm not sure all the states that have done that, but yes, like North Carolina.
They've done it. Yeah. And what happens immediately is pushback from the LGBTQ community who says, no, I just have to use this other bathroom. No, we can't. There's no way that we could ever have any form of compromise with decent, reasonable people, even though we accommodate such a small amount of the population that such a conversation like this literally shouldn't happen. What should happen in a conversation like this is this. I'm just going to be blunt with you. This is how I see it. What should happen is shut the fuck up and we're going to do what we want. That's what should happen. What should happen is shut the fuck up. You're going to use the same type of toiletries everybody else does. Shut up. That's what should happen. But what happens instead is all sorts of these kind of nonsensical little nuanced, well, what if you have a woman who's or a man who's so passable and this and that, and then it puts them at a higher risk and we have to reorganize all of society for these little tiny outliers. It's bullshit. We don't have to do any of that shit. It worked just fine for years and years and years. And here's the truth. Nobody gave a shit. Nobody cared. When I was a kid, when Steve was a kid, and when you were a kid, nobody gave a flying fuck about any of this. We never had a conversation. Nobody had a conversation about this. Nobody was ever talking about this. Nobody gave a fuck about this. It literally didn't matter. It was completely irrelevant. Nobody even, if you were to take a person from just when I was in high school and transmute them to the year 2024 and tell them this, they'd go, what the fuck are you talking about? What the fuck are you even saying? This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. That's what they would say. And I can't even blame them. I can't even
remember those
blame
days.
them.
I mean, that's how it was.
I agree. It should be just That's I catch a lot of heat from my own community because I do say there should be blanket bans on sports, bathrooms, spaces, women's shelters. Like, biological man stays with the biological man, biological females, but there is, you can't deny, Andrew, that there is nuances. There are now trans men out there, biological females, who look 100% like a dude and would scare an actual biological woman in the women's room. They would be like, "Holy shit, that's a guy in here."
Yeah, which is
how do we fix that
which is
problem?
why tailoring laws at the even national and localized level, that you're not allowed to walk around, looking like that, would fix that problem, wouldn't it? As part of the decency laws, it would fix that problem.
Buck Angel couldn't appear as, because Buck Angel appears masculine.
Yeah, why do we need to tailor all of society towards these extreme outliers? It's insane. Yeah, I'm sorry, Buck. You got to wear the fucking sundress, Buck. Got to take one for the team, Buck.
No, I don't want to see Buck Angel in a sundress.
Hey, but this is the point, right? It's like all you're really asking me for. All you're asking me is this, Andrew. What do you do with the ugly women, right? The ugly females. There's tons of ugly females who look like men, who aren't trans anything, right? But they're extreme social outliers. But they're ugly fucking women, right? They're so ugly that they look like men. And we've always had those ugly women. We've always had those ugly women since I was a kid. My dad was a kid, and your dads were kids. Nobody was ever fucking confused about where they went. Why weren't those ugly women just getting pummeled in the street and beaten half to death and sexually assaulted by because it's all bullshit. That's why. So what about that? What about the fact there's always been ugly chicks that look like dudes? They've always gone to the women's restroom. Nobody's ever given a shit.
Would you guys both agree that it's probably
I want an answer to that?
Yeah, no, that's fine. But would you both agree that in our days, because you had mentioned we're all part of the older crowd, that reason being most people really didn't care because they weren't as hypersensitive and trained to be offended easily because of any kind of perceived slight against them?
Well, yeah, of course, hyper kind of. In some ways, yes. In some ways, no. So in some ways, society was a lot more pearl clutchy. In fact, when it came to how people were allowed to behave in public, you know what I mean? They really were a lot more pearl clutchy about it. And that was probably a good thing, Hey, don't make out on the park bench. Hey, don't do all these maybe don't do all this public display of all this type of stuff. Keep that shit indoors, away from it. Nobody wants to see it, and this is a communal space everybody has to share. So how about don't do any of that shit right in public? It's just bad for everybody. They actually were a little bit more pearl clutchy, which was good. On top of that, I think actually it's a little bit more nihilism of people becoming so self-important and so self-aggrandizing that they think that they're minute, little, teeny, tiny communities, which are total outliers, right? Complete and total outliers. Now, there's almost none of these people even exist. Like the kind of male who would do any of this type of transitioning that would look so much like a female that you can't differentiate is a small, minute, teeny tiny portion of the pot. There's more ugly women who just look like men than there are those people. So the question really is, right, what the fuck is the difference? Those ugly bitches have been using the bathrooms for since this type of legislation came around. There's never been a problem.
Jessica, and I got a couple super chats, and we're gonna start probably wrapping this up to keep it under 2 hours. So Jessica,
yeah, no, I'm old and nothing offends me. Like, nothing Andrew has said today has offended me. Yeah, he's caught me on a few issues and made me look like an idiot, but it doesn't offend me, like, to call me a guy or whatever. So yeah, go to the super chats. Fine.
Gen X tends to have a tougher skin. We're born that way. Michael King for £5 say nowhere kids can be present, there should be no sexual stuff, period. I think something probably everybody agrees upon. Inherently,
it's a no-brainer.
Should be sexual fucking stuff anywhere except inside the home of a man and a woman. Why should there be any? I don't even understand the point of that. Like, have to, sit on this park bench and try to, get under your knickers, honey. I have to do. It's just absurd. Of course, you don't have to do that. They don't need to be. People don't even make out on buses, and it's just bullshit. We don't need any of that crap. It's all garbage.
Red Pill Religion, who, by the way, I want to thank Josh for kind of helping set this up. So I do owe him a debate. I'm trying to get him rationality rules. I reached out to him, so I do appreciate.
Yeah, it was very nice of that guy, by the way.
Yeah, very nice. And I'm making a promise to my audience. I will have Josh on as soon as possible to make it happen for him. I do reciprocate very much. Red Pill Religion for $1.99 says, Andrew and I will end the materialistic mind virus. It looks like you got a compatriot in ending materialism for some reason.
Yeah, he seems pretty geek to do a co-debate. I told him I would. So
yeah. he's been on the show a few times. And I'm first of all, I don't even tend to materialism, so I'm a source physicalist, if he's familiar with that. Michael King, another £5, says it's simple. If you have a PP, you go to men's. If you don't have one, then women's. I think that's a little bit simplistic, but I think, Andrew, is that basically your view?
Not really. I mean, you think it's simplistic, but really, where's the nuance? That's basically
makes sense.
That's basically every human being on planet Earth, right? If you got a pecker, you go to the men's room, and if you don't, you don't. Right?
It's just easier, general, because urinals are general. Just but it kind of.
Well, I mean, honestly, right? Isn't that really the applicator for essentially every human being on planet Earth? Like, there's like such an infinitesimal amount of people who fall outside that category that who gives a shit about you?
Jessica, in your position, you get strange looks no matter what. Sometimes you've told me before, right? No matter what you use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I always use the men's room because I do not have gender reassignment surgery, and
it's easier.
I use the men's room, but I don't understand a little bit what Andrew was saying. Like, so what about a transsexual who has had the reconstructive surgery and has to sit down to pee? Where do they go pee?
Where do ugly women go pee?
In the women's room.
Yeah, that's exactly
where.
Still
have toilets.
Yeah, the ugly women go into the women's room, right? Where do you know what I mean? Where do ugly men?
I could see this.
That's the whole point. Like, if ugly women are going to the women's room to pee, right? They're not going to the men's room, even though they look like men. Then why is it that anybody who's dolled up the other direction thinks that they're suddenly entitled? That doesn't make any sense to me.
I can see this as another non sequitur show meme. Ugly women use toilets too. That's just great. Yeah.
But I mean, it's the same. It's really the same principle applied, right? What Jessica's saying is, if somebody cosmetically looks a certain way, shouldn't they be, use this bad? Like, what do you do with them? And it's like,
no, that's not what I'm saying.
Okay, go ahead. Let me make sure.
I'm saying if they have a hole, not a pole, they should go in the women's room.
No, if you were born, whatever your sex is biologically, is where you need to go.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, because that's what ugly people do right this second, right?
Yeah, and I agree with you to a point, but there's no way to police that. We can't have a guard at every women's room saying, "Do you have a hole or a pole?" Like,
and nobody's making the proposal that you do. But here's the thing: you can still make decency laws that say that, and if people choose to ignore them and things like that, yeah, they're going to create issues for themselves. But it's on them, just like every human being on Earth who ignores laws for their locality and things like that. Yeah, it's going to cause problems for them.
Well, let's kind of wrap this up. I'm telling you though, there's a huge difference between the live chats here, and I'm assuming that the comments going to be left in this video are going to be all over the place. And I do try to address comments both directly and in future episodes. I was going to do a after show, but I don't think I'm going to. I think Matters Now might do an after show, but let's kind of wrap it up. I think this was engaging. I think that both debaters did talk about the topic. People know from previous moderations that I am an active moderator. I'm not passive. I don't particularly engage too much on certain discussions like this, but I am not just a passive moderator. I enjoy talking about the discussions as much as anybody else, but I think you guys did have a really good back and forth and really good discussion. I don't know if it got anywhere, but seldom do these types of things ever do. But I think the point is that we can have these discussions. They're not personal, and that people trying to shut down these conversations and say that we shouldn't even be having them are the real enemy, in my opinion, because I believe very strongly in free speech. But Andrew, since you went first, so why don't you kind of wrap us up, and then Jessica will have the last word. Is that cool? Or you
Sure.
anything else you want to add? Go ahead, by all means.
Look, I'm not taking this kind of broad approach that that everybody who goes down this road of trans or whatever you want to call it. I don't even consider this to be a real category, but just kind of for conversation's sake, I don't think that they're evil people, but I think that it does perpetuate an evil society, and it perpetuates a great evil on society. Okay. And I do think that there's lots of people who fall into these categories who want to reform society, specific, all of them, every human being, to just tailor to whatever their form of degeneracy is. And they'll do anything and stop at nothing to make that happen. And we see this in the lobbying groups, the LGBTQ, everywhere. We see them infiltrate everywhere. We see them go after the churches. We see them go after everybody who doesn't conform to whatever their crazy degenerate agenda is. Anybody who says anything as non-controversial as, hey, maybe it's not a great thing that, 20% of women are on OnlyFans. That's not the number, but I'm just saying, X amount of women are on OnlyFans and it's growing daily. X amount of women are doing pornography because it's become something that's so commonplace, such an easy way to make a buck that we should do that. And then you see the kind of and the just screeching from the other side when you just make a simple proposal like, that's really fucking bad for everybody, including the people doing it. And it's because the people who perpetuate these things themselves want to do anything to make sure that whatever changes happen in society, their form of degeneracy gets protected and their form of degeneracy can continue. But unfortunately, in order to be consistent, they have to allow everybody else's to as well. And that's a problem. You guys bring up smoking. Is smoking degenerate, right? Maybe it is. Okay. But if for the good of the public, if smoking was shut down by somebody who came in and was like, look, man, I've got all the force, and we got to put a stop to all this crazy ass degeneracy before all of the West falls. You just can't smoke anymore. I might hide for a little while and puff a few in the back room, but ultimately, maybe he would be right. And maybe I just kind of go, yeah, you're right. And who gives a shit ultimately in the greater scheme of things? Because I don't want all of fucking society to collapse so that you can have your fucking cheesecake in McDonald's, right? So that you can have whatever form of madness that you want. So I'm just saying in this debate, and I tried to stay away from too much in the way of like pure logic or things like this, and instead have kind of a better back and forth. And that's what I'm doing now. It's not a typical wrap up, but kind of moving back into an overview. That's all I'm asking Jessica to do, is just try to take a bird's eye view and remember that the shadow you chase might be the one that you yourself cast. And that's it.